Hi everyone, and welcome back to part 3 of our video series as we work through our last part of the Old Testament, but we have one more part coming up on the New Testament. And in this series, like we said, we are going through just how biblical archaeology validates what we see in the Bible itself. What we're going to be talking about today, like in the previous 2 videos, is just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more that I highly encourage you to go out and to research this for yourself. So having said that, let's get started. This is another tablet that again just validates that the people that we meet in the Bible, that we talk about in the Bible, that they're not just made up characters, that they're real historical people that secular history acknowledges. And here we have the Kirkha Monolith, or the stela of Shalom and Assar III, who is the king of Assyria, Assyria being kind of the world power, as it were, the superpower in the ancient Middle East in the 800 to 700 BC era. And it was found in 1961 in Turkey. And what this does is just basically talk about Shalom and Assar III, his victories, right? He went up against these 12 different little nation states, all united against him, and he kicked all their butts. And one of those enemies that he defeated was Ahab, king of Israel, who is pretty evil in the Old Testament. As far as the kings of the Old Testament go, he's kind of the measuring stick by which all the other kings are measured against. As far as the Bible is concerned. And here is Shalom and Assar III just kicking his butt and bragging about it on stone. Speaking of Shalom and Assar, here's another discovery where after Ahab died, eventually a king by the name of Jehu took over the throne in the northern kingdom. He eliminated most of Ahab's family, actually. But then he goes to war against Shalom and Assar, and it does not go well for him. And this was discovered in 1846 in Iraq. And this is pretty amazing insofar as that it shows, this is, I think, the only known carving we have of a Jewish king bowing down before a foreign ruler. And here is Jehu bringing tribute to Shalom and Assar III and prostrating himself before this foreign king instead of his God. I think there might be a lesson in that. So, skipping a little bit further down the road, about 50 or so years, in the time of King Uzziah, there was an earthquake. Now, Uzziah was this really a famous king, I guess, in the Old Testament because he ruled for so long. One of the things that made him so famous was, unfortunately, he got the idea that he himself could go into the temple. He could go into the holy place. He could go behind the curtain. Him, a king from Judah, not a priest from Levi, could go into the Holy of Holies and offer up a blood sacrifice there on the altar. And when he came out, he was covered in leprosy. Now, Josephus tells us that there was an earthquake at this time, and the Bible tells us that too. Josephus being a historian several centuries later, who talks about that the earthquake was basically judgment on Uzziah for trying to do this, okay? And so the archaeological question is do we find any evidence for this earthquake, this giant, powerful earthquake across not just Jerusalem, but all of Israel? And the answer is yes, we do, okay? Archaeologists have, when you survey all of the damage from around the 760 BC level of strata in the ground, now we know there's no major wars going on at this time, or at least devastating wars for Israel. So any damage here is not man-made. It is natural, or maybe perhaps supernatural as far as the judgment on the king goes. And what we have found all over Israel, we have found foundations that are broken and cracked, walls that have fallen over or collapsed or split, pottery that fell off shelves and just got smashed. And you can see here that it's been having to be kind of put piece by piece back together again. You can see a wall that's kind of fell in on itself. You can see that stone stairs that have kind of fallen sideways, cracks that have fallen in walls that just went down the middle, whole foundations across ground floors that were split in two. Even in 2021, they found for the first time, they had found pottery, which I just showed you here a few pictures ago, from that time. So even in Jerusalem, you have found evidence of this massive earthquake that most think, based on the damage surveys, this thing had to be like a 7.8 to an 8.2 on the Richter. So you get like an 8.0 on the Richter scale that they've been able to kind of figure out when they kind of surveyed the damage across the land, both in places like Jerusalem and Megiddo and just all these other famous places where they have dug. So utterly devastating earthquake. Now, if we fast forward a little bit further in history of Israel, to the time of Hezekiah and Uzziah, about 30, 40 years into the future of what we were just talking about, in 2018, they made this really amazing discovery. They found the seal of Uzziah, right? Now, you would write a document in ancient time, you put your wax on it, and then you would stamp it with your seal. You've all probably seen movies or TV shows that deal with ancient people who do this sort of thing. Here we found the actual seal of Uzziah. It literally says, "I belong to Uzziah the prophet." Okay? So again, just validating that Uzziah was a real historical person. When so many in liberal scholarly circles don't even believe that Uzziah even wrote his book, they think many people wrote his book. Here is Isaiah's own signet showing you, nope, I'm a real person. Here's my name on my own signet seal. So just really amazing stuff, guys. Now, the king around Isaiah's time, one of the kings, was Hezekiah. As we had mentioned, Assyria was a big problem, and the new king of Assyria was getting ready to come to Jerusalem, and Hezekiah knew it. Now, at this time, and still today, there's really only one major source of water in all of Jerusalem, and that's the Gihon Spring. And at this time, the Gihon Spring was more like a fountain, and that when all the water bubbled up, it would just go off in every direction and could kind of go down the hill. And if the Assyrian army was going to surround Jerusalem, you don't need fresh water rolling down the hills, giving water to the people who are trying to surround and conquer you. So what Hezekiah does is this ambitious waterwork project. He gets and he dams up and he basically carves out underground channels and aqueducts basically for this underground water, kind of makes like a river, as it were, to flow through these tunnels that he's building. Pretty astounding archaeological feat, architectural feat for the time. Amazing work of engineering for sure. And in the process of that, all that water had to go down somewhere. And when that water came out, it formed a pool. Okay. And then it would just kind of drain out. And that pool itself eventually would be called the Pool of Siloam, which we'll talk about here in a second. Now, this waterwork project for Hezekiah was so famous that, when he dies, his verse epitaph, like the thing that summarizes his life the best, when the Bible authors were writing about his summary, in the final verse that it gives us about him before he dies, it talks about his waterwork project, okay? And how he made sure that if Jerusalem were sieged, all the water would be inside for the people in the city of Jerusalem and not for their enemies. So pretty amazing stuff. Now, the cool thing is we found the real Pool of Siloam in 2004. Now, a sewage pipe, a water pipe had exploded, and the city went there. The maintenance guys went down. They dug up the ground. They were going to just replace the pipe. But when they got there, they found, holy crap, there's more here than just water and a broken pipe. There's stones and there's steps. Get the archaeologists, right? So archaeologists came and dug up, and they discovered, oh my gosh, this is the real Pool of Siloam. There had been a traditional site that, tradition had said, the Catholic Church had said, this is the place. And it had a lot of problems. No one really thought it was, both biblical or secular. But then they found this, and they're like, this matches the Bible. This matches history. You can see there up in the upper corner, this is what they would have thought the pool would have looked like at its heyday, when it's at its high point. Here you can see the back of the pool today. That cut in the ground would have connected to Hezekiah's tunnel, and the water would have poured out from this tunnel and then would have filled up the pool. Here's kind of a big shot of what they've dug up so far, and you can see the steps that would have walked down into the pool, and they have yet to dig out that area because, again, you can't just dig because Jerusalem's not an abandoned city, obviously. You have whole neighborhoods as well as politics and religion that you got to be really careful about when you do these sort of things. Now, by the time of Jesus, the Pool of Siloam had become this giant mikvah, right? Which this giant public bathing area that you would use to make yourselves ritually pure and clean. And then after you've ritually purified yourself, according to the Levite law, Levitical law from the Torah, you would walk up the pilgrim's road there. You'd go up those steps, and you would go into the temple, and you would do your business there on the Passover and Pentecost and all the other different holidays that you had to go and present yourself before the temple and to do the sacrifices as described in the Old Testament, right? So you wash in the pool, you go up the pilgrim's road, and you go up to the Temple Mount. Now, they also, once they found the real Pool of Siloam, and obviously they know where the Temple Mount is, they kind of about figured where the steps would be, that the famous pilgrim steps from the New Testament era. And lo and behold, they found them. It's utterly amazing, you guys. Here are the actual steps from the first century. These are the steps that led up to the Temple Mount from the pool. These are the steps that Jesus and his apostles and so many other Christians and Jews in the first century would have walked up these steps. So when Jesus heals that blind guy in John chapter 8, after the Pool of Siloam scene, he's taken up to the temple and he's put on trial. These are the steps they would have walked up from south to north. It's utterly awesome, you guys. I highly recommend if you get to Israel someday, you go and check them out. It is just such an amazing part of Bible history and just history in general. So here's the Gihon Spring. This is kind of a drawing of the tunnel cuts that I'm talking about, and you can see these were discovered in the 1800s. They're pretty well known, and you can see here in these pictures the water today as the tunnels exist, and the water flowing through it. Not very big, not very wide. About a whole person wide, almost maybe two people wide in ancient times. One American, we're so big in this country. But just amazing. We even found an inscription in there that talks about the building. Here's a replica of it. The real one's in a museum somewhere in Israel. And it tells you that you're here during the king of Hezekiah 2,700 years ago. And in Hebrew, it talks about how they dug and the kind of engineering that they did to build it. So just really amazing, guys. Really amazing. Now, what happens when Sennacherib actually shows up? He's the king of Assyria. He finally shows up. Hezekiah's worst nightmare comes to pass, and Hezekiah is worried. He's fortified Jerusalem, but the second biggest city in Judah, Lachish, is ready to be attacked. And in 701, it is. And after the attack, when all is said and done with this war, Sennacherib is back in his hometown of Nineveh, and he builds a giant relief, like these 12 giant relief stones, kind of showing like the battle from start to finish on each stone. Each tablet is about 8 feet high, and when you put all 12 of them together, it's about 80 feet wide. It's like a splash page. It's like a comic book. It's just showing you different scenes from the battle that are taking place. On one side of the battle, it's Sennacherib giving permission to say, "Go, attack Lachish. You have my permission for slaughter." And then on the other side, it's basically Sennacherib bragging about himself. "I'm king of the universe. As all of the conquered people of Lachish are bringing him tribute after the battle." So just really amazing to see these different scenes that are portrayed on these different tablets. And does this match the Bible? Yeah. In 2 Chronicles 32, it tells us that when Sennacherib laid siege to Lachish, as that was going on, he sent officers and basically messengers to Hezekiah and Judah, and to say, "Hey, do you know what I did, what me and my fathers have done to all the peoples of the other lands? Were their gods able to save them from my hand? No, they were not. And do you think that your God is going to be able to save you from my hand? I highly doubt it. I'm going to destroy you once I'm done with Lachish, so you better say your prayers." And these are some of the pictures from those splash pages that we're talking about, right? So here he is sitting on his throne. He's bragging. He's boasting about how great he is, king of the universe. I don't know which side this poor lion was fighting on, but the poor fella, it did not end well for that lion. Here you see some archers getting ready to fire and to shoot their arrows in the battle. Here is really amazing thing, guys. I know we tend to think of like archaeology or ancient warfare in Hollywood terms, where just two armies with swords just go running at each other and kill each other, and whoever has the most people left wins. But that's typically not how ancient warfare worked, particularly when you were attacking a city. You can see in the background there that the people of the city are throwing all these rocks and debris and arrows and whatever they can throw over the side. That's what that falling debris is. And this tower right here, this tower is on wheels. Okay, this is a siege tower that they're literally pushing, and you have archers up in the siege tower, up in the high ground, who are shooting arrows and throwing rocks, and they got their shields to protect them, right? So this is basically sophisticated engineering. This is advanced warfare for its time. I mean, the thing is powered, it's Flintstone powered as far as you're pushing it with your feet, but it would have been a really formidable thing if you saw that coming in the battle. You had your typical, what we tend to think of as ancient warfare with your spear throwers and their shields. And any Jews that they conquered or managed to capture, just as a matter of psychological warfare, they would stretch them out and then they would fillet them. Okay, so you're up in the cities of Lachish, you're looking down from the towers, from the city walls, and you see your neighbors getting basically stretched and skinned. That's going to have a psychological effect on you, right? They would also impale them. Again, you're impaling the neighbors, and you're like, I did this to them, and I'm going to do it to you if you don't surrender. So you see some real psychological warfare going on. I'm not going to lie, this is probably my favorite picture. When you look at this, you think, holy crap, they had a tank. They did not. This is a battering ram. You can see here as it crashes into the side of the wall, you can see the bricks that are falling. It's not shooting anything. It's just a long rod of iron or whatever it was. Now it has wheels. Okay, it looks like a tank, but it's basically again just a battering ram. But it has like this shell around it to protect it from falling debris and from rocks and archery and fire, like anything that the enemy from the wall would throw at them. This is giving them protection. So in some sense, this is like the ancient Flintstone tank that you're kind of just pushing with your hands and feet, and you're just ramming it into the side of a wall. So pretty awesome for sure. This ancient battle tank, which is awesome. However, after the war was over, Sennacherib won. And all the men who died, the women and children, were hiding in the city places and whatnot. But now the women and children have been taken captive. You can see here the women and children being put on a wagon and probably being taken off into slavery. So not very fun in that part. And then here are the people who survived, who are coming to bow down and to bring treasure and offerings to the king of Assyria for his conquest, as they beg for their lives and worship him. So he makes this giant piece of propaganda to celebrate his conquest of Lachish. But why not one over Jerusalem? I mean, isn't that what he wanted while he was in Judea? Isn't that literally what he said he was coming to do, to conquer Jerusalem? And the answer is he couldn't, because Hezekiah and Uzziah had both cried out to God to rescue them, to rescue Jerusalem. And that night before battle, as the army of the Assyrians left Lachish and was arriving at Jerusalem, God sent one angel who came down, and one angel killed 185,000 Assyrians in a single night. When Sennacherib woke up the next morning with, like most of his army dead on the ground, he had no choice but to retreat. He created this, this giant relief propaganda in his palace. He had to make lemonade from this terrible thing, for him at least, somehow. So he at least celebrated his victory over Lachish, even though his victory in Jerusalem was completely undone. So he downplays the bad things and upplays his positives. However, this does not stop all the scandals and the rumors. And eventually, having lost face, as it were, lost respect, two of his own sons murder him, and a third son is going to take the throne. So kind of a brutal end for a brutal man. Moving ahead a little bit past the time of the monarchy into the time of the exile, eventually, historically, Babylon conquers Assyria. And the ones who do that are Nebuchadnezzar and his father. And obviously, Nebuchadnezzar conquers Jerusalem, where the king of Assyria failed. Nebuchadnezzar will succeed. And what you see here in this picture is a five-sided clay prism that belonged to Nebuchadnezzar. And it's basically all the people who worked for him. It's basically like an ancient equivalent of a Rolodex. For you younger people who don't know what that means, it's basically his contact list. It's all of his employees and basically what they did, his middle management people. And of the hundreds of names on there, 3 of them should stand out to you: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. 2 of them are officials to the king and to his son, and 1 of them is the commander of the king's merchants. Does this match what the Bible said? Yeah. After the famous or infamous fiery furnace incident, the king promotes Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego to high positions in the province of Babylon. And here we have a list of all the employees in Babylon, and their names are on it. Now, can I say for certain that this is the same Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? No, not 100%. But the fact that it's the only time that those 3 names appear are on this list, there's no other duplicate names. And just the fact that it matches the right time, it matches the right place, it matches the right king, the names are there, it would be really hard to make the argument that this isn't the same 3 men from Daniel. Speaking of that sort of argument, this is really cool. From Daniel, several decades later, the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, Nabonius, is on the throne. And he is basically in this cylinder. He's offering up a prayer for his son, Belshazzar, the new king of Babylon, who's the second most powerful ruler in the kingdom. While his dad is the main ruler, he's away. In fact, because Nabonius basically just got tired of all the politics. He got tired of the swamp. He got tired of the corruption. Does this sound familiar, American viewers? And so he leaves Babylon to get away from all the corruption. And he goes off to this oasis town in Arabia, and he's going to stay there basically 12 years until basically Babylon falls. And he puts his son in charge. Now, dad is still fully 100% king. He's top dog, but his son is now the second most powerful ruler. He's like a co-heir, a co-ruler, if you will. And he will handle the day-to-day stuff. Now, for centuries, critics of the Bible always said, oh, in the book of Daniel, there's no Belshazzar ever mentioned in any of the records that we have from Babylon. Nabonius is king when Persia takes over, not Belshazzar. This is made up. The Bible is not reliable. Daniel's not reliable, blah, 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 blah. Then we find the father's cylinder. And Nabonius says, hey, I'm out of town. My son's in charge. May the gods give him good life. This also answers a very important question. And the famous incident in Daniel 5 where the angel's hand appears and writes on the wall, and Belshazzar is having this party and he's drunk and he's not sure if what he's seeing is real, and when he sees everyone else is seeing it too, he literally craps his pants. The Bible tells us it wasn't very flattering. He has Daniel eventually come in, and he basically says, hey, if you can interpret this, I will give you all this stuff, and I will make you third in the kingdom. Now, this was always weird. Why is the king not promoting him to second in power? Why third? When you have the cylinder of Nabonius, you understand why. Okay, because dad, Nabonius, is in charge. Belshazzar is second, okay? Belshazzar cannot give Daniel what he does not have. He promotes him as high as he can, third in command. This makes sense, right? He's not going to make him second, okay? He's not going to step down, right? No king's going to do that. But he does give him this promotion. And Daniel gets to enjoy it for all of 4 hours. It was a wonderful promotion. All 4 hours of it. Because what that prophecy on the wall and Daniel accurately says, and historically came true, that very night, Cyrus and the Persians have snuck into Babylon, and they're going to go into the palace, and they're going to kill Belshazzar and most of the royal family, and they're going to take over. And most of the city didn't even know that Cyrus did that. It wasn't until 3 days later, when Cyrus comes in on a triumphal parade, that the people of Babylon were like, holy crap, did Persia just defeat us? Yes, he did. Now, along those same lines, and speaking of Persia, a few hundred years after Cyrus, During the time of King Xerxes in the 400 BC era, or Ar-Hasar, if you want to use his Hebrew name. Famous story, obviously, of the book of Esther. She marries Xerxes. It's a well-known story in the Bible. And what you see here on the side are basically receipts from different officials doing different financial transactions. One of the bureaucrats who's involved in one of these financial transactions is a man who lives in the city of Susa, whose name is Marduk, or however you want to pronounce that. And if you're thinking, okay, who's that and why should I care? Marduk is the Persian Elamite way of saying the Jewish name Mordecai. Okay, if I say to you Joshua or Jesus or Jesus or Isa or Yeshua, it's different languages, but it's all the same name, okay? It's all the same name. It all means the Lord's salvation. Same here. Here's the Persian name. Here's the Jewish name. It's the name Mordecai, you guys, living in the same time as Xerxes, from just like in the book of Esther says it happened. So to quote Dr. Gordis, who's a rabbi scholar who wrote extensively on the book of Esther, this is how he put it, okay? The odds of this, that there were two officials named Mordecai who were both having the same name, who were living at the same time, in the same place, serving the same king. Come on, that's scarcely this is, it's so improbable. It's not a coincidence. This is the same person. And if Mordecai is real, guess what? So is Esther. All right? So just amazing, awesome things, guys, like, tax receipts, helping to prove that the book of Esther and the characters of Esther were real historical people, just the way the Bible says. All right, guys, we're going to wrap up things here for now. This is the end of our Old Testament series, but not the end of our video series. We're going to do one more, part 4. And in that part, we are going to talk about the New Testament and how we have different biblical archaeology examples and evidence to validate many of the things and places, particularly the life of Paul in the New Testament. And I'm looking forward to that, and I will see you in the next video.